Well, mate, look, thank you for coming to chat with me. I know that I've actually stuffed you around a little bit because I forgot about a signal chat, and then I was like, oh, damn, there's one here. But Penny, mate, well, people will pick up directly where you're from as soon as they hear your accent. But mate, thank you for coming and having a chat with me.
No, no, my pleasure. It's always good to sort of get a bit of get the message out there, especially in these times, with a little bit of lack of focus on Ukraine. So, anything, any sort of way I can put the message across is much appreciated. So, thank you.
Anytime. Do you feel like there has been a shift in focus from like the media and everything on Ukraine? Has like Israel Gaza had an effect on that around that time, do you think?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think there is a element of the Israel Gaza conflict that I think has been more widely it has more widely divided populations across the globe. I think that my personal opinion is the fact that Israel and Gaza is such a complex sort of situation, and there is a lot of people that are sort of very far on either sides, but like sort of almost 50-50 down the split of these major Western countries is that creates so much tension and brings in so much more media. That's why I think that the media is sort of focused on it. Whereas with Ukraine and Russia, I think that the vast majority of the Western countries that we sort of podcasts like these are seen in, and that we are from, we're very set from the start of like, no, Russia's pretty wrong in this. Russia's the bad guys, Ukraine is the good guys. So there's not that much of like a conflict there, and obviously conflict brings viewership, I guess, when you talk to Western media companies.
Yeah, well, if you're trying to sell ads on something, there's nothing better than people yelling and screaming in the street and having back and forward commenting of like, no, you're a prick, you're a prick. Like that is what sells. That is media these days. Um,
No, absolutely.
like rage baiting is a legitimate thing. Like I can't do it. I like like I have not evolved to that level of social media yet, but there's people I know who specifically say things that they know to be wrong. So people will comment to boost the algorithm. I know a guy, I won't say who, but he very military known, just spent years and years in the military, like well, decades, and occasionally will purposely say something is a tank that's not a tank. Like he'll refer to say because he knows people in the comments, but you're an idiot. That's a T-72. But knowing, yeah, but you're just pushing on my algorithm. I'm like, bro, that's genius.
That is, I think I see that a lot in Instagram nowadays, where like you say, people would just be like, something like really ludicrous, and then you just get all these like like you know, chair like armchair experts being like, no, this is that, and yeah, I guess the more comments, I guess the algorithm is like, oh well, let's push this to the top. Um, but yeah, I think I mean, I kind of took a step back. I don't really talk too much about the Israel Gaza conflict, just purely because of you have no idea which side someone's on. You literally you could meet someone that you would swear down is like free Palestine all in all, and he'll be like, no, Israel is right. Like I support Israel, and you're like, the fuck, like oh my god.
Yeah.
So yeah, I fully avoided that little time bomb of a conversation.
Oh,
But
mate,
yeah,
it is a time bomb. Do you think that Ukraine may have lost any supporters in this? Because of course Ukraine has sided with Palestine, and not to stick on it, but they've sided with Israel, sorry, and Russia has very quickly leaned into Palestine, and
yeah,
all of that, and there's this divide, and we know if you read anything about intelligence operations throughout the Cold War and whatever, just sowing division is a big part of this. Whether loyalties lie or not. Do you think that a lot of people who may have been really hardcore Ukraine supporters in the West may have seen that support now when they're supporting Palestine and go, well, oh, okay, I'm actually pulling away my support there because like being anti-West, anti-America, if Biden is saying we need to fund Ukraine, but he's also saying we need to fund Israel, that because they're pro-Palestine, then they're saying, well, I'm not going to side with any of that.
yeah. No, I can definitely see. I mean, like speaking from a very small, team point of view, we can definitely see a lack in like donor sort of funding for Western teams, from home countries. That's for certain, and that's 100% since the start of the Gaza Israel conflict. And I think that's more a little bit to do with the media presence. So, in terms of like larger scale, I think that there's a very good point to be made of, well, when you look at the countries that support Palestine and those countries that support them, their track record and their like, look at them in terms of like how good is that country at being humane, and what have they done in the past like 20, 30 years, and pretty much all of them are pretty like iffy countries. And then Israel is supported by, the vast majority of like modern Western first world countries.
But if we talk 30 years, I'd probably top the US on that list of countries that have done some sketchy shit around the world, and they're the largest donor to both conflicts. If you look at like CIVCAS throughout the last 30 years, no one's topping the US.
Oh, I mean, if we like, I guess you could talk GWAT, and I know that there'll be conspiracy theorists watching this, like, oh my god, yes, but the GWAT, as much as the weapons of mass destruction, and then 9/11, and then the invasion of Afghanistan, all of that. I mean, when you look down to the very minimal what they were trying to do, you can kind of get that they had the right idea going. And I mean, I'm British, and I was British military, so kind of talking from. But I never went to Afghanistan, to be clear. I didn't do that, but you can see that they were trying to do sort of the right thing. Maybe I think they just went about it the whole wrong way. And they did some pretty, like you say, some pretty fucked up stuff in there. But it's more about, I think that from my point of view, I mean, I think the in Gaza, I know we shouldn't stick on it too much, but is that it's kind of similar, where Israel kind of had the right to go in there and be like, well, you guys just killed a load of my civilians in Israel, so we're going to come fuck you up. But they've gone about it the wrong way, I think, in quite a drastic scale, where they could have minimized, especially civilian casualties, by quite a lot. And I of course, not entirely, because when you've got a terrorist organization using civilians as human shields, and unfortunately, that's the way that war goes sometimes. And as we've seen here as well, it's not been uncommon of Russians and to take refuge in sort of schools and especially at the start of the war. But I think it's hard to sort of say that Israel has. I think there's a lot of similarities between Israel's fight in Gaza and the Russian invasion at the start of the war. I can definitely see similarities in tactics and also the outcome of certain military operations there. So it's sort of hard to classify. Obviously, it's two different conflicts, and you can't like really bring them together perfectly. But
yeah, that's the thing is, as we say, it's a different conflict, and we know something that this wider conflict has shown me, whether Ukraine or Israel or whatever, is just how messy conflict gets and how blurry things become. We know, seeking refuge in areas which you maybe shouldn't be, but as well as defensive positions put in areas of which they may not have been as well. Amnesty was very, very outspoken early in the war about positions where Ukraine had gone into defense. But it's also like, but what are the other options in times as well? It's a very hard thing. But my point is more that even if we say maybe conclusions between these shouldn't be bought when we talk about the media, the average person on the street is drawing those conclusions. And I actually think I think Ukraine should try and steer as clear in their own narrative informational space, steer as clear from Israel and that war as just possible. Just be silent on it, because you're going to pull people away. Like I saw a comment today on, I think it was Reuters Instagram. They had a post about casualties, civcas in Ukraine over the past month, and I think it was Russia killed 180 civilians or something over the past month, something like that. Terrible number. Any civcas is shocking, regardless of where they're from. And like all the comments were like, well, the US-backed war in Israel has killed 15,000 and blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting just to see how like the average Joe, you know, because a lot of my circle is guys like yourself and whatever, we're maybe more involved in one area in the world, but how does the average person see it? I just thought, not to get sidetracked, I just thought that was very interesting to see.
No, I think you are right. I mean, like I've said, Israel is such a complicated conflict
Mm.
that you're completely right. Ukraine probably shouldn't be picking a side there, especially as we depend so heavily on Western countries. And as you know, like the Republic of Ireland officially recognised Palestine as a country, and although the Republic of Ireland, not a huge donor to Ukraine, didn't make a huge difference in this war, but in terms of other countries that might follow suit and might be thinking the same thing, that is going to limit the sort of help that they'd be willing to give to Ukraine. Now they've sort of stood on the side with Israel. But I also recognise that they might have been asked to do that. I mean, politics is politics, I'm sure, and there's every chance that Biden rang up Zelensky and said, "Hey, we're trying to help Israel out. We've given you all this stuff. Can you please like send a press release saying that you stand with Israel, and help us out?" And I'm sure there's absolutely loads of politics going on in play behind closed doors. But if that's one thing I know about Ukraine, it's that politics and bureaucracy is absolutely runs this place. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that is very apparent. I'm sure we'll go into that. Now, look, off the bat, I just want to start with sort of your background, as it is interesting about some bits and pieces that have happened to you. I'm not sure how much you want to go into it of back and forward from the Brits and Ukraine, but just a simple like run over of your time, your experience, and then to where we are, and then we'll break down individual like cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was British military for about 7 years or 8 years if you count the time I was back. But I joined at 16, joined the Royal Engineers. I spent 4 years in armoured engineering, driving around in tanks, pretending to be tankies, and then posted over to an EOD unit. My brother came out at the start of the war, and then when he came out, I decided to finish my contract, sign off from the British Army, and went into that wait period. I ended up coming out here in November 22, which was well, we'll go into it in a little bit, but maybe a little bit early. And then I went straight into the GUR Legion, International Legion, and we went down to Bakhmut. We fought in Bakhmut from November, or sort of end of November through till until I left. I was still fighting in and around Bakhmut after the collapse, right up until when was it, September 23. I then went home to see my mum and my granddad, and then basically, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, but I got arrested by British civilian police, was charged with absent without leave from the British military, and then got returned to unit. I spent 6 months fighting a court-martial that I won, and then they tried to charge me under the same charges, but on a lesser sort of, it's called a summary hearing. Instead of a court-martial like court, it's like you basically go in with the CO and he just says like, I find you guilty of this. This is your punishment, shit burst. And then from there, I then served a month in military correctional training center. I mean, they call it that. It is a prison. It's governed by Her Majesty's Prison Service. So, but it's a very chilled out prison. They've got a farm there. You chill out with goats and stuff and pigs, and very strange. And then I've just returned. I've returned back at the new year, and I went and joined the 21st Presidential Brigade, We fought down in Krasnodevka, which is just by Donetsk city. And now we're back in Kyiv. So that's my rundown so far of the war.
Yes. So obviously you've got a lot of experience, now bridging, well, basically 2 years, say, give or take. What changes have you seen in the war? Because I spoke with a guy only yesterday. It's not public; it was a private conversation, and he said, "I've noticed," because he was very similar. Has done 3 6 month trips over there as a foreigner,
Yeah.
and he said the war has changed significantly for how the Russians are fighting, how we're fighting, and the challenges of what we're up against. What was your experience then compared to what you're seeing now at the front?
I mean, I'll say even September 23 when I left, sorry, and we were fighting just outside not Adivka, Klishkivka, which is just south of Bakhmut. Also, if any Ukrainians are watching this and listening to me absolutely butcher the name of every town, I do apologize.
Oh, worse than you, mate. I'm shocking.
Yeah, it's terrible. But there was absolutely we probably saw in the few weeks in that fight, or 2 or 3 weeks that we were operating in that area, I probably saw 3 FPVs in that entire 3 weeks. And they were mainly targeting armor. They're not bothered whatsoever with individuals or a team of dudes. And then obviously 6 months away, I came back, and that first op we went out on down in Krasnodevka, I saw probably 7 or 8 FPVs just on the infill, and then it was just constant. You're constantly have it they have a code word. This unit, they have a code word or code numbers, which obviously I won't say, but for that basically says there's an FPV in the air, and absolutely constantly, every 5 minutes on the radio, they're just saying it over and over again, all day, all night. And I just thought, God, and what gets me is there is a certain element of no matter how good you are as a soldier, no matter how well you do your job, and no matter how well trained you are, an FPV flying into you, especially IR ones, you could be going along at night, you wouldn't even know it's there, and then that's just you. That's done. You're dead, and you could be 10 years SAS. You could have, it doesn't matter. An FPV is absolutely. And I know a lot of people have said this to me, well, they said the same thing about the machine gun in World War II or World War One, or Hitler's World War II, like Hitler's buzzsaw. They're oh, no matter how good you are, and all this stuff was said then. But there is an element of, I guess, they can fly 200-300 meters above you. You wouldn't even be able to see them with the naked eye. And then they just oh, I see that dude, I'm going to go kill him, And that was the biggest change for me, where I was just holy shit, this is going to take a couple of weeks to get used to. And then you've got oh yeah, we've got EW backpacks, don't worry. But great, carrying along this 12-15 kilogram extra bit of kit, it makes you feel a little bit safe, but they can only block you've got backpacks now that are blocking 10 frequencies. I've literally seen a guy carrying a backpack with eight frequencies, and an FPV still came in, and it didn't kill him. It missed him, but that jamming didn't work, because they're just using different frequencies every single day. And you're just God, what do you do with that? Where do you go? Do you just carry? Does every single person carry 8 frequencies that are all different until you just cover the entire spectrum? Because there's a fuckload of frequencies out there. You'd need fucking 20,000 dudes all carrying all these different frequencies. So yeah, that was a big shock. And I guess also was I guess I shouldn't say it too much, and this isn't to say that the Ukrainians aren't fighting and they're not doing well, but the mentality, there's been a massive change in mentality from the Ukrainians, and I think it's to do with being so tired. And I mean, it's hard for me to really give them shit because I just went home for 6 months, and whether or not I was in court, a court martials, and then in jail is irrelevant. I spent 6 months at home, not in a war, but there is like a very there's no desire to really want to take land anymore. That it's all defensive. It's all about, but back when I left in September, we met guys that, it's like, yeah, if someone dies, someone dies, but we got to take that bit of land back. It's part of Ukraine. We need to take this back, that back. And now it's, well, listen, we don't want anyone to die. So if the Russians come for this trench, you just get up and leave. And it's sad to see. Obviously, I get it. We're running low on guys, and nobody wants to die. Like no matter who you are, people say like, "Oh yeah, I'm buzzing to die in Ukraine." No, that's a lie. You're lying. No one wants to die.
Yeah.
But it is unfortunate to see that that, and I guess it will change again when the new conscripts, like the new mobilization comes through, and the guys start getting trained. But as of right now, it's a tough place to be morally in the East. But,
Yeah, well, that is what another contact of mine told me very recently. He said very similar. There's been a very large mindset shift, and that was one of the things very obvious to him at the front. And he basically said that we need to rely on the new guys to come forward with that sort of go get 'em attitude, because guys that have been there for 2.5 years getting bloody, everything and fighting and this, they won't, like some will, but on the whole, you won't get that back. You've got to have new guys roll in. And that's why he was saying this mobilization is so important to happen early, like happen now, as soon as possible, to get these guys in, motivate them and send them there, because remotivating is far harder than just the beginning motivations.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's definitely like you say, a shift there, and I'm pretty confident in the fact that I know that it will change back, and they'll redevelop the sense of wanting to push forward again. I think that obviously what's happened recently in Kharkiv has had a big play in that, in the Kharkiv Oblast. That's a massive morale, downer for us, and of course that's and why the Russians do it, and it's why they do a lot of stuff. People ask me, my girlfriend here in Kyiv, who's Ukrainian, she asked me the other day, like, why won't they release like the Azovstal defenders? Yeah, like the guys that are in Azovstal, and she can't understand it, but obviously that's because the Russians know that it pisses the Ukrainians off. It pisses us all off, and every week there's still protests here in Kyiv, like trying to remind people that free Azov defenders, and the Russians are just not going to release them because they know that brings morale down, and that's a big part of what they do. It's a big part of warfare. You look back into World War II when we last saw a war like this in Europe, and look at what Hitler was doing. Flying planes over, dropping pamphlets, telling them about how they're going to, and we've seen that. We've seen drones, literally fly from the Russian side with bits of paper basically saying, yeah, you're going to fucking die tomorrow, so I suggest you get up and run. And it's a big part of warfare here, and yeah, it's a tough one, but you gotta just put that to the side of your mind. If you let it affect you, then you let them win.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Kharkiv there, and I think, well, firstly, I think the Kharkiv, what has happened up there with the two front lines opening from Russia, the opportunity for that to happen is completely the Ukrainian command's fault in that area. That we know for a fact, because Ukraine's opened criminal investigations, not military, criminal investigations for the people who should have been seeing the defensive works there, and that they were non-existent, that Russia was, because at the end of the day, they would have been looking for somewhere with reconnaissance drones. Okay, where can we open somewhere? Okay, well, there's nothing being built here in an area 20 Ks from a major city, which is 100% where defensive work should have been. And that sweep in for now 3 or 4 weeks and holding of, 100 square kilometers, that shit is so, it's so demoralizing. But I think too, like, you can blame, the Russians all people want, because, but they're a participant in the war. You're going to take that advantage if it's handed to you. And that
Yeah.
Kharkiv opening around to Lipsy and Volchansk, that was handed to them on a platter from the
Yeah.
corrupt fucking bastards who let that happen and let their own men out there with no defensive works, or lack of defensive works, lack of whatever. And instead of, I think a lot of like these online bloggers are like defending the issue, be like, no, like, like, you need to call this out, because otherwise it's going to happen again and again. And it's a very difficult thing. That whole like morale issue.
No, 100%. I think I think the lack of defenses, and it's something that I feel quite strongly on, and some people would disagree, but I think that all the soldiers in Ukraine, the guys that actually fight, they all have the right mentality. Everybody, just wants to get back at the Russians, wants to take their land back. The major issue here across the vast majority of units is the commanders. I'm not saying they're bad commanders, but their training is Soviet training. They're trained on how to lead an army in a Soviet style of war. And we've proven, every Western, you speak to any military in the world now, and you sort of say, is the Soviet tactics good? Like, no, they're not. There are a lot better ways of doing things than how the Soviets did. And the soldiers can adapt to that really quickly. It's what soldiers are good at. Okay, well, that's not working, so we're going to change this. We're going to do this slightly different, and then see if that works. But what's not changing is the command structures and the way that commanders use their guys. And I guarantee you put that down, that you talk about the lack of defenses in Kharkiv, and that 100% would have been a commander that probably had a poor understanding of how defenses should work, and thought that they were good enough, because obviously there were defenses, if you want to put it in inverted commas, but not near to the level that you would expect on a border, like you say, 20 kilometers for a city. But I almost guarantee that commander probably went out there, looked at them, and sort of, yeah, these are great. Yeah, you guys just chill out. There's no problem. Just chill out. I'd be very surprised if it was the soldiers that sort of like kicking back and not wanting to crack on. But that's something that I think will change with time, and I think that there's a big emphasis on the West to not just provide weaponry and ammunition, but also to come here or to allow officers to go and train in these Western countries, to sort of bring them out, and not just officers that were in the army already, brand new guys that are going to become officers. Like, don't let them even get this idea of Soviet tactics in their head. Take fresh canvases and you just take them out, and you just say, like, just ignore everything about Soviet tactics. All right, trust me, and we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that with the tactics, because, and morale, because I was going to add on that as well. It must be very difficult for the soldiers seeing now for the past 4 months just red on the map, like the red hatched every day. Like, there's more Russian ground every single day, regardless of how, what announcements are made or what strikes are made, oil refineries or an A-50 or these massive targets, that it's just continual grinding forward. But it is an interesting one on those Soviet tactics. And I think this will become, we're going to get more answers on this, I think, throughout the war as it extends. Because I read a lot of doctrine about maneuver warfare, attritional warfare, and the NATO versus Soviet. And in many factors, the NATO is far greater at giving power to junior NCOs and maneuver elements. But what will become apparent, and what I'm reading, is it will become more apparent 2-3 years on, and in a massive attritional phase, on what can replace soldiers very fast in an attritional war. And this is something which I don't know, and people are, the officers I read and talk to are, studying this now. Is the problem with the NATO system is because, you as a Brit, man, as an Aussie soldier at one point, our NCOs need years of training to be a competent NCO. If that guy gets killed, you can't just replace him straight away. So it's very difficult. Where the Soviet system, which takes into account we're going to have massive losses, it just accepts that as a part of it, and massive artillery, and everything's going to perform under just huge artillery. It will be, a lot of people are watching very closely, going, in an attritional war where you may lose 250,000 men, with the replacement, how does that actually look? And it's something I don't have an answer to, but it will be interesting to see then down the line, especially with things like drones. And if elements can't actually move, well, maneuver warfare is fucking hopeless. It's so hard, man. It's something we're learning. And I hope the West is learning. We're looking over and going, what works? What doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, on a large scale, I don't have the experience to sort of talk about it, as someone who commands a brigade or a battle group. But from a section point of view, or like a platoon, I look at how the Russians would go through what we call a platoon attack. A platoon of guys or a company of guys moving to take an objective, eliminate the enemy, secure, and then dig in or deploy. And the way that I see the Russians do it, and the vast majority of what I saw again was in Bakhmut, and that was slightly different because it was Wagner, but it was just meat to the grinder. It was literally you 20 guys, you're going to walk down that road, and then if you get to the end of it, where you want to set up in this house, cool down the professionals, and the professionals will come in and fight it for it. And then they would all get killed. And then they'd be like, okay, well, in a couple of hours, we'll send you 20 down. And you're like, fuck. And my team, I was on the op. I wasn't on this specific op, but they captured a POW, a Wagner guy, and they sort of asked him, like, why are you here? And he was like, well, basically, I got here today. And they said, who doesn't want to fight? And two guys put their hands up and they shot them in the face. And then they sent us through a minefield to find a safe route. And I was like, I'd rather be in Ukrainian prison than back in the Russian side. And you think, okay, cool. The Russians are set up pretty well for that because they just kind of have endless numbers and they don't really give a fuck how many people die. But the thing I think is that no matter what in an attritional war, no matter what, the side that doesn't give a fuck about their guys is always going to win. Like, that's just shit bust. You are never going to, like, if it was America versus Russia, but Russia, mobilized their whole country and they did not give a fuck how many people died, the US probably wouldn't win that war, or they wouldn't win for a long time.
Look at, the Eastern Front. Like, the amount of Russians that died makes the rest of all the other countries combined look small. Exactly. So, and that's not me saying that, Ukraine should stop giving a fuck about their guys. Like, I'm definitely not saying that, but there is a way around this, and it's right down to that small level attacks, because when I watch Ukrainian units doing it, they're still very Soviet. They're like, we're just going to run straight at this thing. I don't think I've ever seen a smoke grenade get used for cover or distraction in an assault in my entire time here. Apart from by Westerners, I think that it's still very much like heads up, straight at the target, give them all you got, and then jump in and just let them have it. And that's not always going to work, and there's better ways of doing it. And it's just about training people to be that competent in what they're doing and how they move around and how they assault positions. But, it's a long-term thing, it's not something that we can change tomorrow. But it's something that I think will be something I try and push as my time here goes on. Yeah. I spoke to another couple of guys talking about mobilization, and they were saying, look, to mobilize properly, you need 12 months. You need like 6 months of legitimate training, like proper training, even down to getting guys fit enough and instilling discipline and all of this. So 6 months training. And then they need like 6 months experience on an area on the front line that's not too hot. And then they can go on these like really hardcore operations to have success. If we're talking a mobilization force to have a 2025 offensive, and if say that 25 offensive is now, like we want to have it in June, July next year, if Ukraine want that, they need to mobilize now and spend 12 months than getting men prepared, and hundreds of thousands to do this. But is there the amount of guys to pull off the front line? I know this is, commander level stuff. But it is interesting that, and these tactics that we see it's really interesting to see. And you mentioned something there about fighting Wagner in Bakhmut, about sending guys in, and then sort of the professionals rock up. And I don't know if you saw the article that came out maybe yesterday or the day before about the casualties have all been leaked from Wagner PMC, like how many actually died.
Oh God, I don't even want. I honestly couldn't even imagine.
So
it must have been.
I'll butcher the numbers a little bit I'll butcher, but it was about 19,500, which is actually almost the exact number that Prigozhin said. Prigozhin said 20. But regardless in that, and regardless of whether that is a lower or higher than it actually is, at the end of the day, the percentage of different units will still remain the same, if this makes sense. That it was 87%, I believe, were prisoners, or 80%. And then that 10, 13, 15% or so, whatever it was left over, was the professionals. Now, it doesn't matter if you believe it's 50,000 or you believe it's 5,000. That percentage will remain the same, basically. And that was very interesting because talking to guys at the time, they're like, yeah, this is what we're seeing. And you've sort of confirmed this again, of send in these guys and then send in the more professional force. And I think a lot of guys paint, the one thing I've seen about Wagner and the Russians in general is they paint everyone with the same brush of these are Russian soldiers, where the scope of capability between units, even inter-unit, can be so great, like so wide, that can be a hard one to get guys' head around, because you've got Wagner guys who are pulled out of prison and go that way. And then you've got these guys who are full-time operators, done it for 20 years around the world, but it's all painted with the same brush. Has that been your experience as well?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you instantly know when you're fighting someone who actually knows what they're doing, and it was pretty rare. There was always an element of there's a big difference there. And I also think that the guys that were professionals, they kind of had this, like, if it was me and it was in me in their position, I'd probably be the guys being like, hey, yeah, well, I've been doing this a fucking long time, so you're going to go forward because you're brand new, and then I'll follow you. Well, I think that might have played an element into it, and I think that there was but it goes back to just how Russia does everything. That's a bizarre way to do things, and I'm not entirely convinced on it. But I'm also not convinced on that death toll in Bakhmut, because even 20,000 seems so like too low for the amount of VDV, the Wagner that were there, plus all the prisoners. I mean, as well, it was like the reason those prisoner numbers are so high in the percentage is because they were literally sending some of those dudes in without weapons. They were like literally using them as like the guy that we caught. They didn't give him a weapon. They just said, look, there's a minefield here. I'm going to send 5 of you running across. And if you get across alive, you're basically going to come back and then show us the way so we know the way. And that's like, holy shit, like you're literally using them as sheep. Like, you could do the exact same thing with a monkey or a sheep or a fucking horse, like, but you're just using a human person. And that's, if you start doing that with your people, the casualty rates are going to be high. And I mean, I probably wouldn't take that deal from Wagner if I was in prison in Europe, Russia anymore. That's for sure.
No, it's pretty bloody wild. Now, on another topic, like obviously you're on Twitter and Instagram and Telegram and all these social medias, and someone who's, you live now in Ukraine, and your life has moved there essentially, and you've been fighting there over the period of a couple of years. What do you think that bloggers often get wrong? Like guys like myself, what do you think, like, you mostly see and think you guys just don't know what the fuck you're on about?
Damn, that is a good question. I think, do you know one of those questions where, like, the amount of time I've sat down like with my missus and someone's been doing like watching like a United 24 video, and I'm like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But like, putting a name to it, I think there's definitely an element of like the media, the guys that are here, they they have like an element of, how do you put this? Like, I don't think they understand the severity of it. I think that when you speak to some people, they kind of, certain people, you'll tell them like a very shit story about how your mate died or something, and they'll put on a sad face and be like, oh, that's terrible. But I think that there's definitely an element where I don't think, maybe some people do. I'm not saying that like everybody's like this, but I've definitely spoke to people where, and I can see it in their eyes. They're like, oh, that's really sad, man. I'm really sorry for you. And you're like, that you look like you're talking to some fucking randomer, like about, their dog dying or some shit. Like you meet someone at your office, he says their dog died, and you're like, yeah, cheers, mate. Like I've got to get back to work. But then on the other side of the hand is that they will go on, online, and they'll talk about this super sad story, and try and get everyone to feel sorry for them and stuff. And I think that's like a big part of where I kind of struggle, because I think anyone that goes online and like spins up this like dramatic, like horrible story that that they've witnessed or that they've heard about or whatever, I've kind of from a generation of like, I think that's attention seeking. But I also know that it's needed to sort of develop feeling and like, so people care about the war. But I definitely think that there's an element of like just, I don't know what word would be best to describe it, but not like insensitivity, but like just like a lack of like, I guess you can't really sort of say it, like you can't really talk about it unless you've been there and you've watched a mate get shot or shrapnelled, and you're like, oh fuck, and that's a bit different. It sort of, it doesn't annoy me. I don't get really annoyed about it. I just sort of think like, how do you know that? And it's not all of them. Like I said, I know some cool guys, and I sort of mentioned United 24. I know they've done some, like, in my personal opinion, kind of stupid stuff where they went and got like stuck in a basement with it wasn't the third assault, but it was a Ukrainian unit, and they literally had like Russians like 20 meters from them. I'm like, that's fucking dumb. Like, I wouldn't advise anyone to do that unless you're trained and you have the ability to get yourself out of there. And but that's cool. And then I also know guys that have been forward and been to the front and spoke with soldiers on the front. But these people that come to Kyiv, and I call them clout chasers. And to be honest, I hope I'm not insulting you, because I'm not putting you all in one bag, I promise.
Mate, no. I am as critical of myself more so than anyone.
But it's more these people that, like, I know certain individuals that have like wives and families in the US or in the UK and stuff, and that's great, brilliant. Like, I'm not saying don't have a wife and kids, but then they'll come out here like every 3 or 4 months for like a week, and then they'll rock around Kyiv in like full multicam with like a bum bag on and all their patches that they've got from units, and they'll go down bomb and diktat in Kyiv and spin some dicks about when they were like 4 kilometers away from an S-300 strike, and you're like, yeah, mate, fucking cheers. Like, I'm glad you're here, sort of thing. And I guess it's not what I see online. It's more what I see here. But there's a vast majority of Westerners that just come here for clout, and that does snap me. Like, that really pisses me off. When you go to like a bar or club, and we don't. I guess you can always tell most people won't go around saying to everyone like, oh yeah, I'm a soldier in the International Legion. Like, that doesn't really happen. And so then you'll get these Westerners be like, yeah, well, actually I'm here. I've just delivered 4 IFACs to a unit, and like, yeah, a bit of a big deal. And you're like, all right, cool. So you've spent like, all this time here, and now you're running around because you delivered a bit of medicine or whatever. And I think there's like an element in today's society across the whole world where you can't do anything nice without filming it and putting it on fucking Instagram. It's like, to me, it looks like, when someone goes and buys a homeless man food, but they've got to film themselves doing it. Yeah. They walk out of Tesco's and they're like, oh, I've just bought you a sandwich, mate. It's like, yeah, just do it without filming it and we'll be good, mate. You know what I mean?
We used to call them the fictional characters of Kyiv. Got these Westerners popping around in multicam and telling all these spinning all these yarns, and you're just like, you're full of shit. Like, I remember, man, this guy in what's the bar called? Anyway, it was the bar that all the journos went to, but he was there, fat old dude, would have been like 45, 50, probably just a fucking sex pest to be fair. But he was
Yeah.
handing out to guys like sort of on the sly. You know, there's like challenge coins. He was handing out
Oh, for
CIA
fuck's
challenge
sake.
coins, and I'm like, mate, if you were actually a spook working for the CIA, firstly, you're not going to be in here doing this, and you're not handing out these fucking coins. You knob. And I'm like, these people have just
Literally.
created a backstory for themselves. And I know that a lot of Ukrainians get fucking livid at this because a lot of Westerners find it a lot easier actually to raise money because they've got their school friends and all maybe army friends or this or that from a country that has far more wealth in average GDP and can raise a lot of funds that go into all their bullshit of them going there to then deliver for IFACs. And I'm not saying that's everyone, but I'm saying there's
Yeah,
a
no.
hell of a lot. There was that one American fucking bloke who apparently raised $1.7 million and just disappeared. People know who he is. He was very early on standing in front of the tanks and shit.
Oh, not the guy from the Mozart group.
No, not him.
Because he was also a dick.
Yeah, no, there's this guy. He put up like a post. It was people will know who it is. People go, "You're an idiot for not knowing this." But one of like the original online guys, and he got called out by like a lot of people, and then all this like Jack Daniels on tabs that was funded through shit and everything, and it was just it's a real
Yeah.
problem, man. And I know even when I was there in the beginning, I don't know if it would have got worse or better, but
I tell you what, like I'm like just on a slight spin note, you know, on donations. Like I recently met a drone operator, a Ukrainian guy, and but he likes shooting. He's got his own sniper rifle, and he's done it before the war. But he's a drone operator. He didn't want to be a sniper. Fair enough. Pick your job. Cool. Happy with that. Anyway, he's got this literal $12,000 scope on his sniper when we went shooting with him. And I was like, fuck me, you've got like my scope. Like when I was serving in a marksman unit, it was a sniper unit, but I promise I'm not a sniper. I don't tell anyone I'm a sniper. I hate that. I was on a 308. It doesn't count. But anyway, so I was like, fuck me, you know your scope is like 12 grand. Mine, I'm fighting Russians, and mine costs like 4. And he's like, oh yeah, it's like donated. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I did like a fundraiser. I was like, but you're a drone operator. He's like, yeah, but I might be a sniper one day. I was like, fuck me. So this is where all the money that's like getting donated is going. It's just going on shit that's not getting used for the war. And I think that's happening a lot now, a lot more. I think people are like, oh God, I need a new TV. I'll just fucking start a fundraiser and put a picture of me and Kit. And that's tough now to really find out a way around. And I can kind of use this as a way to slide in, if you are going to donate, this is you've got to do a bit of background and base it off their Instagram. And I know that's not the best idea, Instagram, but it's as best as we get out here. And if anyone wants to go see what my team is up to, you can hit up on Instagram that mad lad Murphy. I'm sure we'll write it somewhere maybe in the thing, but yeah, that mad lad Murphy. He's the TL, and hit him up, and you can see what we're up to. But basically, this personal fundraising now has just become like a cesspool of dudes being like, well, I want to buy my wife a new car, so I'm just going to fundraise for it or something, and it's kind of upsetting, but it's how do you stop it, without banning fundraising altogether?
yeah. Yeah, well, I know with shit, I was like, I can't believe that not every single Ukrainian guy at the front line has good multicams, good body armor, good helmet, Peltors, night vision. I'm like, the amount of money that's funded in to you,
Yeah.
why is everyone not running the best kit? And people, but the fucking Abrams and this and that. I'm like, fuck the Abrams. For the cost of one Abrams, you could get every single bloke out there some decent fucking cams and boots. That will make a significant more difference than a steel vehicle that's going to get eaten up by a drone, regardless of if it's a fucking whatever model. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's a disappointment for me that is not more put on that. Everyone talks about F-16s and ATACMS and this shit, and I'm like, yeah, but there's a heap of guys in trenches who have shit equipment. How about that first? We can plug that gap instantly, quickly, but it needs there has to be shipping containers full of equipment somewhere that is either waiting for new mobilization or is somewhere sitting in the west of the country on checkpoints with guys with the box Gucci kit. I used to say this every time, and people don't believe me. When you drive from Lviv to the Donbass, the equipment on the guys gets progressively shitter.
It does. It does. It's so true. When you walk past, like, I think the only, like, when you walk past Lviv checkpoints and they're all holding, like, M4A1s, and you're like, I'm using an AK. Like, what the fuck's going on here? I was like, I want to like pull over and be like, give me that now, give it. Fucking have my AK. No, I totally agree. It's a super weird time of getting into, but then also, I guess it's also like when you go see the good units, the guys that actually do shit, they tend to be pretty sorted out. It's kind of like political, once it's almost like Call of Duty. I like to compare it to Call of Duty a little bit with, once you get a good kill streak going, like as a unit, you start getting upgrades. You've got to earn XP to unlock your night vision and stuff, which is absolutely bizarre. But when we come from a Western military where you wouldn't go out at night on exercise or an operation without night vision, and every single person would have it, and everybody would be have the same exact kit. And out here it's like, it's just bizarre where it's like, oh well, this plate carries shit, so I'm going to just buy a new one. And like from a Western military standpoint, like you wouldn't be allowed to, especially not in the British Army anyway. Whereas out here, it's like, well, I just don't want to bother running my black back plate because I'm never going to be running away. I've heard people say that before. I'm going to save weight, get rid of the back plate. I'm never going to run away from the enemy, so cool. And you just think like, that is absolute insanity, but like fair enough.
Yeah.
And like,
well, if you watch, water can land behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. I mean, for me, in this artillery war, it's more important to have like full soft armor than worry about plates. I'd be more concerned about the artillery. But I mean, I don't know if you watched the video of the operation in Belgrade. But there was dudes like from the Russian Freedom Fighter Brigade that the Ukrainians have, that are all Russian nationals. And some of them are just running along with baseball caps on. They're like, I don't want a fucking helmet. You're like, okay, man. I'm really pissed off if I've got to carry your body out there. But like, fair enough, it's your choice. And that's a weird change to have. Come from a Western military where everything is so rigid, and you get here and you're like, oh fuck, this is absolute chaos. But it's fun chaos, Yeah,
it can be chaos. It can be all over the shop. Now, you said before we went like recording this, you spoke about time you went back to the British military, during this. And you spoke about, like, to me, about your words were the British Army would get hammered if they were in something like this. Can you sort of extrapolate on that and tell the audience, I guess, what you said to me and talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so to clarify, that was during my time of court martial. Basically, I left the British military 2 weeks before my contract officially ended, and I won't go into the specifics of it because there was a conversation of like, hey, well, I've done all my paperwork, can I leave? And they were kind of like, yeah, you can go. But then they found out that I went to Ukraine, and they were like, holy shit, no, you need to come back. And anyway, so I was placed as AWOL, which is absent without leave. And so when I went back and got arrested, I was basically put back into my old troop, and it was full of all the same guys, but they were kind of aware of where I'd been. I was denying it. No, I've never been to Ukraine. Don't know what I did. Super bled. No, oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's fine. And that 6 months that I was there, I had sort of an agreement where like, hey, well, I'll talk to the guys about Ukraine and about the war that's going on, because I know the intel you guys get from the Inc Corps and won't always be up to date, and it won't always be very effective and accurate. So as long as we understand that you're not going to turn this around and use it on me in court martial, we can talk about it. And I did. I spoke to a lot of them, and we helped out on exercises, planning exercises to be based around the war in Ukraine and stuff like that, and that was great. But when you look at how difficult it is for them, like, I mean, look at the British military now. When I went back, we were talking about drones, and I was like, fuck me, yeah, the British Army must have like hundreds of thousands of drones now. No, each brigade has 3 drones. That's it. That's their like combat ready 3 drones to go. I'm like, you lose a drone every day without fail as a company, not even as a brigade. A brigade probably loses like 10 drones a day. How does the British Army not realize that? And they're like, yeah, well, it will happen. It's just it takes so long to change doctrine and then get the equipment in. It's like, well, I'd fucking hurry up if I were you guys. It's coming fast. And the British Army has like this train to be ready for 2026, ready to deploy to Ukraine in 2026. And you go there and you're like, all right, probably the most important thing with this war now is ECM, electronic warfare, electronic countermeasures. I'm like, I'll go speak to the ECM guys, ask them about what their insight is. Yeah, well, none of it really fucking works. So that would be the hardest thing, would be trying to find a vehicle that works with that has a working ECM. And it's like, all right, yeah, well, you've got 2 years. And they're like, yeah, no, we probably just need all new stuff. And you're like, so they're not probably going to be ready by 2024 or 2026, sorry. And then right down to the soldiers, the mentality. Some soldiers, they're great. British Army, you've still got really solid guys that if I could have, I would have recruited them out of the unit and brought them back to Ukraine with me. I spoke to guys there, and I was like, listen, mate, just sign off, come out to Ukraine, and we need guys like you. But then the vast majority are guys that they don't really belong in the military. People that will have had a bad knee for 2 years straight, and it's like, oh, your knee's still bad, is it? What did you do to? Oh, well, I twisted it on a tab and it's never been right again. Oh, okay, yeah, no worries, mate. Sounds like you don't fucking like fizz. And as I said to you, and I feel like if he ever watches this, he'll probably message me complaining because he tried to get me in trouble. But it's basically this guy who'd been on the biff for a long time. And just as I came back, he basically went on parade for training, for physical training. And then they do their own little program. So he went in the gym, waited 5 minutes till everyone left, and then came out, went back to his room. No, I said, listen, listen, mate, okay, you thinned out early. I've just been AWOL for like 11 months, so I'm not going to punish you because it's a bit ironic, right? But then I said, look, but if you do it again, like, I'm gonna have to Agai is like our version of like punishment. You lose your weekend or your day or your evening or something. I said, I'll have to Agai, He's like, yeah, no worries. Anyway, 2 days later, does the same thing again. All right, mate, well, you kind of fucked it here. Like, you've been a dickhead. I gave you a warning. You've done it again. I'm gonna Agai you. And the dude starts crying. Like, all I'm giving him is like, you have to go to the guard room at 8 o'clock at night in uniform. It basically just takes your evening off. That's all it is. He's a 24-year-old man and he's crying about that. I was like, fuck me, And I said, I kind of asked him, I said, listen, mate, like, you know where I've been, you know what I've been doing. I'll tell you now, if we went to war tomorrow and I had to take you, I'd shoot you in the foot so I didn't have to take you, because you would quite literally be useless there. If you start crying when the Russians start shooting at you, it's not much fucking help to anyone. So I think there's definitely a mentality issue in the British Army now. No one that's good really wants to stay or join because there's nothing going on. And the guys at the British Army does attract are just people that are like, oh, well, we're just here for the fucking like guaranteed wage, Bakshi days, and we can just live our life chilling. They're not really interested in fighting for the country or going to war. And so yeah, I think that the British Army resilient, and they always have been resilient, and we're probably the best in the world at doing something without all the right equipment and just getting the job done. But it would definitely take them a few months to really get the guys acclimatized to this is fucking war. This isn't the GWAT. This is like you're going to be getting artillery like every second of every day. You're going to be walking around, and you're going to have FPVs flying at you left, right, and Chelsea, and There's literally never a second on the ground where you're not trying to be killed by either a drone operator, a forward observer, or a dude with a gun. Like, you know, and so yeah, that's what I think. I can't speak too much about the American military, but that's what I took from the British.
I to be honest, I think every Five Eyes country, we have all the same issues at the moment. The Yanks I speak to, the Aussies I speak to, and I still have a lot to do with the Aussies, but like we have all the same problems. Recruiting, massive issues everywhere. Recruiting the right, like we put down to recruiting. Oh, we've got recruiting issues. We're going to fix it by this, but you're like, okay, you're fixing it by recruiting the right people though. That's a huge problem. They might just be, oh, well, look, we've filled the numbers, but it's like, well, who have you filled this with? I think, yeah, we have a lot of issues. You're saying this, you know, preparation for 26. Do you think that we will see the British military deploy into Ukraine?
I mean, I think that whole deploy the 2026 is like a, you know, they're just trying to look like they're getting ready, I guess. I think that the only case that we would ever see any NATO troops in Ukraine is in like if it looked like Kyiv was going to fall. I would like to think that if it came to that bad, like we lost everything, like, you know, Russia controlled the entire country right up to like Boryspil, right outside Kyiv. I'd like to think that, you know, NATO would step in and help out, but either that or, you know, if Russia decides to use like tactical nuclear warheads, you know, if that happens, I highly doubt that the world's going to sit by and watch that happen without stepping in. But I don't think it'll be anytime soon. I doubt it will happen, you know, without some very drastic change of how the war is fought. You know, and I'm talking, you know, like massacres. You know, like I don't think it's going to be something that they're going to take lightly, obviously. But I hope to. I mean, I really do. I hope to see NATO come over here, and I know for a fact, like, you know, I see like escalation all the time. You know, they're talking about the F-16s that are being donated are going to be flown from. Some of them are going to be flown from neighboring countries within NATO for security reasons. And Russia have said, well, hey, if you launch them from those countries and they strike military targets inside Ukraine, well, that's like, I'm taking that as, you know, escalation from your part, you know, because I'm going to count that as your plane, not a Ukrainian plane. Now, it's a small thing, but it's quite easily could be a big thing, you know. What if that happens and Putin's like, okay, well, I declare war on Poland now, you know. Who knows what that guy's going to do? Either fuck it, he's a bit nutcase, but yeah, I'd love to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen in the next sort of like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, the only point I disagree with on there is say the nuclear weapon thing, because we hear this a lot. I have actually a different opinion. I think if Russia was to use a small yield nuclear weapon, I think we might actually have the opposite. I think that we might go, hey, he's fucking dead serious about these threats. It's not just now a threat he's saying at the Kremlin. He fucking used one. I think we would see just a complete, like, nothing in and out of Russia, like sanction, like, to the gills of everything, rather than, because I think it would be like, well, if one's gone, well, what's stopping the next one? Like, you don't want to put into a position where it's like, well, fuck it, we're just doing it. Like, that's the whole mutually assured thing. And I know I've sort of built that opinion off what Mersheimer says about like the use of battlefield nuclear weapons like that. Like, would that be a case? I don't know. I think it would almost more be if we saw like a large scale false flag event that would then bring in NATO that they couldn't avoid, rather than like a directed strike. I don't know, but I don't know. My opinion is shifting that I think we may see troops. I don't know if we'll see Frontline for a while, but you know, I think Ukraine, you know, obviously you and I have discussed, and no one's hiding it. It has a manpower issue. You know, could the UK or France or whatever deploy guys in on the third line logistics sort of shit to free up men to actually fight? Like, I think that's maybe what we'll see. I don't know, because you just remember how
Yeah.
unpopular would it be if we're sending, you know, at the end of the day, like we spoke about, it's all politics and bureaucracy and, you know, coming from democratic countries. How unpopular would it be if it's like, hey, we're going to step into this war? But like, as well, there's all the people are going to be like, oh fuck, we might be stuffed here on getting the next election, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure. But time will tell. Everyone who argues about what's going to happen, I'm always like, well, we're going to find out. Like, we're going to find out. Just be fucking patient.
I mean, it's an interesting idea, and the only thing I will say is that having seen the state and the attitude of the guys that do the logistics and stuff, is they are not keen to fight. So, you know, I'm not sure of the effective, like how effective those soldiers would be, but it would be interesting. I mean, obviously France has said, you know, we're sending soldiers there and we'll train them, and obviously the training mentality is something that's very well needed. But you know, for instance, I know guys that have been on op interbo and interflex, which is the British soldiers training Ukrainians but within Britain, and I hear the same thing from all of them. It's like, well, you know, it's taking so long to change the what we teach to be suitable to that war that actually we're just teaching them useless stuff.
Yeah.
All the Ukrainians that go there. I mean, I met, the one that I've met one guy who's on Interbo or Interflex in the UK. I was like, oh, how do you find it? He was like, it was kind of pointless. Not gonna lie, I spent 3 months there, and you know, everything we learn isn't really effective to this war. And I was like, that kind of sucks. And I was like, but now you're in a trench with me, like 200 meters from the Russians. Like, aren't you meant to be teaching what the guys what you learn? And they're like, yeah, well, that's what they said. But actually, my commander didn't really like the fact that I'd been gone for 3 months while everyone else had been fighting. So he stuck me in this trench. And it's like, right. So all of that knowledge that you do have that might be useful, maybe it is or maybe it isn't, is now probably going to get wasted because you're just sat in a trench, getting shot at day in, day out, and probably ended up, maybe not probably, but he might have ended up dying there. And it's like, okay, so there's a massive. I'd love to see UK troops in Ukraine training under their own prerogative. They're basically just sent there and they're like, you guys go find out what the fuck's going on. And then you figure out the best way to avoid that. You speak to the Ukrainians that know this stuff. And then you just basically make that professional. You take that and you make it a professional way. You train them, you train new recruits, you train guys, and you like interlock those arcs of knowledge. Because that's another big thing in Ukraine is that, fuck me, every unit's like got their own little secret thing going on, and they don't want to share the information. It's like, oh, this unit's got like this really high-tech drone, but they're not going to let anyone else see it because they don't want another unit to have it. And it's like, motherfucker, you're fighting the same war. We're fighting the Russians here, guys. This isn't like who can get the nicest kit. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to see it. I don't think the British are going to do it. I think there's so much in politics to play. It's all about, are we going to get re-elected? Are we, if we send troops there, is it going to be a good or a bad thing in the public eye? And it's like, fuck the public eye, fuck all those idiots, and let's just get it done. But I'm kind of not a politician, so it's what it is.
Yeah, it's a hard one, man. It's one of those things that has, it has lasting effects on what the military does, because the military is just an arm of the government, and it's an arm of the government who's voted in of the day.
Yeah.
And they have to do what's popular by the populist vote. It's a fucking it's a wild thing, man. And of course, then that breeds corruption in a populist system as well. It's the best system we've got, but bloody far from perfect. Now, like, can you tell us about some of your, I guess, experiences on the front line, some of the shit you've done? If there's anything you'd like to share with us, like, guys love some combat-y type shit.
I mean, probably my favorite, like, funniest story was it was that same time right before I left. We were out on an op, and we basically dug in. We spent like a solid day digging in these positions, just the five of us. We were basically there to recce a further assault. We were acting as the recce element for our unit, and we were going to recce the positions, see where we could set up defenses, and then see if we can, put a good assault in on a Russian position. Anyway, we just finished digging. We're all hanging out. It's middle of the summer, like 30 degrees, sweating buckets. Just ordered, like, we've just been through like all our water in a day. So we're like ordering resupply. And then between us, there's like two wood lines and probably about 800 meters between them. And the other wood line is the Russians, but the brow of the hill like hid us. So you couldn't see like the actual, you could just see the tops of the trees. Now, all of a sudden, along the top of this field between us and the Russians, this fucking like T-72 just rolls across, like just chilling. And we were kind of like, oh, nice. T-72, that's probably Ukrainian. Looks like it's coming from the Ukrainian side, like nice. And then it like traverses, like points its barrel directly at us. And everyone was like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Like, get the fucking jabs out, like, let him have it. Then it like stops, it traverses back to the Russians, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's okay, no problem. It's the Ukrainian one." And then it traverses back to us, and we're on the radio like, "Can someone fucking tell us whose tank this is?" They're like, "Nah, not ours. It's definitely not Ukrainian." And then anyway, it drives off down towards the Russians, and we're like, "Oh, cool, yeah, like it must be Russian," but they didn't see us. And then the Russians just blow it up, and we were like, what the fuck is going on here? So we don't know if it was Ukrainian. Like, no one to this day knows if that was a Ukrainian tank or a Russian tank, or if it was Russian and the Russians just accidentally destroyed their own tank or what. And I always thought that was probably what epitomizes Ukraine. Like, and I know it sounds bad. It's not that bad, but it is funny because it was just the idea of like, nobody had a fucking clue what was going on, but it was funny, right? Everyone was laughing. No one really was worried. No one got shot. And it was all kind of like, oh, well, it all ended well. But yeah, I mean, that was a pretty funny, like way that I described Ukraine and the war here. But yeah, I think the sort of maybe like the closest call, if you want to hear like a slightly less funny one, but I think the closest call was on an infill very recently in Krasnoyarivka, and we were just in the back of a truck, and like I honestly have never been more scared in my life. Like, Jenny, I hold my hands up when I'm scared. I was fucking terrified. We're driving along. I'm in the back of the bed, facing back. Like, just sun's just coming up. They don't have night vision there, so they don't drive at night. They drive just as the sun's coming up. And literally, like, one by one, 4 FPVs just coming right at me. Like, I'm looking backwards and they're just flying after me. And I was just like, oh, fuck, man. Like, trying to shoot it down, but shooting a drone from a moving vehicle, that's like near impossible. It's kind of wasting ammo. And just like one, and then like hit right at the back, they just missed. And then another one just missed, and another one just missed. And there was 4 of them. And by the time I got out the other end, I thought I was having like a fucking embolism or something, like a stroke. I was like, holy fuck. Like, that was probably the worst experience I've ever had in my life. But that's what pretty much everyone goes through here daily now. So not that alley, but kind of funny. It's funny in the hindsight, Now I look back at it, funny.
Yeah, it's always those closest shit that becomes the funniest ones. The shit that you shouldn't have survived that you did, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
I should have actually asked this on our earlier conversation, but have you noticed, you talk about the amount more FPVs. Have you noticed if the Russians are fighting better or worse since the beginning to now, as far as like individual soldiers?
I think my experience will be slightly sort of, it won't be as valuable in that question, purely because I fought Wagner for basically the entire time I was here before, and now I was fighting a professional Russian unit. But yeah, definitely between fighting in Bakhmut to fighting where we did, I was in a sniper section, and although not a sniper, again, I was an engineer, not a sniper, but with a marksman rifle and looking through a spot scope, we could watch when we were firing. You could watch Russian assaults, and actually, like, surprisingly, you'd see Russians like come around a building and they'd actually like stack up and they'd clear around, they'd hold the long, people would roll around, they'd get on the door, and I was like, do you know what? But like, although we're about to shoot them, like that's pretty good drills from them. Whereas in Bakhmut, what you saw normally was just like a dude run up to a door, like throw a grenade in, wait for it to go off. Then he'd run in and just start letting rounds off all around the room, you know, and you like not shooting at anything. He's just shooting at lightly firing positions, like, and you're like, okay, well, yeah. So obviously there's a difference there because it's two different units, and one's a mercenaries and one was professional. But yeah, definitely, I think do you know what, as well as I've seen a lot more combined arms here now. Like I've seen a lot more down there. I saw a lot more use of infantry with BTRs and actually using them effectively. You know, that they stick by, like what you used to see was if it was infantry with the BTR following it and the artillery started hitting, they'd normally run straight away from it because they'd be like, well, the BTR is a target or the BMP or whatever it is. But obviously that then removes their like majority of cover. Whereas now when we saw it, you know, they'd start firing artillery at it and they would all basically huddle up and get real close to the vehicle, which is a big change in terms of, you know, discipline, but it also kind of makes more sense from like a military standpoint. I think I'd rather be closer to at least half of the direction that I'm facing be covered by like a bulletproof wall effectively, rather than just run for the open fields. But yeah.
Oh, it's interesting, man. It's something I ask pretty much everyone about, like, you know, what changes have you seen? Because I think this idea, this propaganda that a lot of people put forth that the Russians can't learn and adapt and fight differently has a massive negative effect, because you're then going to assume that you're facing the same they're going to make the same mistakes now that they made in 2022. And it's like, we don't rely on those mistakes being made. And I think there's been a propaganda backfire somewhat too of, they're just these orcs with shovels running around. And people going, well, how the fuck are they making ground in every direction? If that's true and they're winning the offensive battle at the moment, what's happening on our side? Like, and I think people are starting to look inwards and go, what's happening here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, like I've said, that there's again like a massive mentality shift, and I think that's attributed to a lot of the ground loss at the moment. You know, there's a lack of we got to like die fighting for this piece of land. You know, a lot of people are like, fuck this trench that I've been sat in, like let them have it. And I think that's I think that the military is as much as people wouldn't. I think right now, currently, with all the Western equipment they've got, I still think that Russia and Ukraine are pretty much evenly matched. I think it's now just about mentality. And the Russians know that if they don't follow orders and they don't charge that trench and they don't take that building, they're just going to get shot by their commander. So they're facing like potential death, but maybe survival and you've taken a building, or well, maybe not shot, but you're going to get beat the fuck out of by your commander. I mean, there was a pretty good video that went around recently where like a Ukrainian drone was filming some Russian soldiers after a Russian assault, and basically like the commander just comes over, takes the helmet off this dude, and then just like kicks the fuck out of him for like 10 minutes, just like stamping on his head and stuff. And he probably did something like, you know, forgot to clear a door, or, you know, he didn't give someone a magazine or whatever it may be. You know, it wouldn't, you know, it's just, that's what the Russian military does, right? They just instill fear in you, and if you don't do things right, then you're going to get fucked up. And when you fight a war of attrition against people like that, you're always going to lose. You know, if they don't care about their troops and they're just going to throw them at you, you're always going to lose that war of attrition. Anyone will. So it's a bit of a shitter, but the good thing about war of attrition is, you know, eventually they're going to lose so many people, and hopefully a lot more than Ukraine does, that they're going to either be like, well, that's too many people, or the people in Russia are going to be like, the public are going to be like, right, you know, I'm scared of Putin, but fuck this shit, right? We've lost, you know, however many it may be, like 1 million, you know, we've lost 1 million soldiers, a lot of like husbands, fathers, brothers, fighting for something that we don't really fucking want. We're just told we want it by the media. So let's, you know, raise hell, and maybe a little revolt or a little bit of civil unrest could hopefully, you know, bring the rains in. But I think it's a far way out. Again, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, people have been predicting that every week since the beginning, and it's like it almost in sitting here now, it almost seems further away than when it started.
Oh
Um,
yeah, 100%.
it's same as the sanctions. It's like the sanctions seem to be having less effect now than they did in the beginning. And we knew that. That's how sanctions work. Sanctions have a term of when they're working, and then they taper off because you find other markets. You know, you
Yeah,
can't, okay, we're not buying it. Oh shit, okay, we're not selling product. We have product. Who will buy it? Well, there's 7 billion people on Earth. People need fucking oil and gas. Someone will
yeah,
buy it. And then because it'll taper then as well. Um, yeah, it is interesting you say about, the way of fighting and this attritional aspect. How do you feel that yourself and, guys you speak to feel about the goals set forth by Ukraine? Um, Forget if there's some Russian collapse, bloody move, like, something happens.
yeah.
Forget about that. Militarily, what do guys think about the goal set forth of 91 borders? Like, is it achievable, or is it that's a political thing spoken about? We know realistically we need to stop the front line moving and hold what we can.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could sort of link this into something that gets said a lot in Kyiv by guys that don't fight. These are people that are fighting age males that are avoiding the military, and for whatever reason, you do you. I'm not bagging on them. It's just people that haven't fought, and a lot of them will say like, well, why don't we just fucking let them have Donetsk and Luhansk and like ask for a ceasefire? We give them Donetsk, we give them Luhansk, let them keep Crimea. And that's like the mentality of a lot of people, apart from
Really?
those who fight,
Yeah.
right? Apart from those who fight, you like I get really fucking annoyed by it because I'm like, well, has any of your mates fucking died? Have you watched any of your mates die fighting for that land? Like, you don't get to fucking have an opinion on it if you're not fighting. You ask a soldier, any soldier in the entire country, like, should we give Russia Donetsk and Luhansk? They'll be like, fuck no, what are you talking about? We're going to take back the whole of Russia.
Mm.
And although the mentality has sort of dipped now and they're focused on defending and like keeping people alive, that doesn't mean that the overall mentality of one day we will take back all of Ukraine. We will have all our land back. That is the mentality. One day. And they know that it's not around the corner. They know that that's a fucking long time away. But that is the belief here. And I believe it. I believe that given enough resources, enough training, and enough Ukrainians that want to put their lives on the line for defending their country, I fully believe that we can retake this. We've seen how Russia fight in these last 2 years. People thought that, I don't know if you remember the 3 or 4 weeks leading up to the start of the invasion. People were like, oh well, Russia will be in Kyiv in about 4 weeks. They'll roll through this country. I mean,
Yeah, I was fucking in Ukraine when that was going down.
oh, exactly right. So
I was there for a
right?
month before the war. Yeah, it was fucking
So
wild.
exactly. Everyone was like, "Oh, Kyiv's falling, bro. Like Kyiv's gonna go. It's gonna be like 4 weeks
Oh,
max. Russia will be
I
there."
expected Su-57s flying overhead day one, dropping fucking ordnance. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
that's what I expected. I expected full on near peer mill. Holy fuck. Um, Shit. We're seeing cruise missiles in the sky. That is, that was seen like that, but it was the Russian Air Force, I think, was the biggest failure of everything in that invasion, and that led to that combined arms failure of the tanks on the ground. And if I was in
yeah.
the Russian army, I'd be fucking pointing, going, the reason our guys died in those initial weeks is because of your jets not working, or not being effective at least.
I
Until
remember. Yeah, I remember those convoys that were just in like 4 mile lines, stopped for like a week, and I
40
just
mile,
thought,
yeah.
yeah, like 40 mile, and like
Hmm.
I just thought, damn, if they had one A10, like just one A10, like Warthog, I mean, that would have just been, or an Apache pilot would have just been like, that would have ended the war. They'd have lost like their entire military. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely it's definitely achievable. I fully believe that it is achievable. We just need to take the right steps. And I guess you could say that about anything, really, technically. I mean, that's a very ambiguous thing to say, but you know, I'd be pretty stuffed if I sat here and was like, no, I don't think we'll win, but I'm just here for the fight. Like that's not a good mentality to have. So
yeah. Do you think, and this is something I've been thinking about more and more and discussing with people on and offline, you know, with someone like yourself and your mates and whatever, who have obviously sacrificed a hell of a lot, you know, including the ultimate sacrifice of many tens of thousands of guys. And of course, that affects millions then, family members, extended family and friends and all of this. If there was some deal signed, if Kiev, if the government went and said, look, we need to, you know, forego this land or this or that and make some concession, do you think that, how do you think soldiers would take that, knowing what they've given?
I think that I think after like 2 months, they would be really pissed off. But I think any soldier would be pretty overwhelmed with joy to hear that the war had ended. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be like the vast majority would be like, fuck yeah, no more fighting. Like I get to go home, I get to see my family, I'm alive. And after about 2 months, I'll be like, fuck, you know, we did all of that for nothing, and you know, and whatever, you know, they may think. But I think initially that I think everybody wants a war to end, you know, and I guess that, of course, that makes sense. You know, if anyone that's sat in a trench would say, yeah, I'd fucking love for the war to end, but I don't think that it would remain like a happy feeling for very long. I think a lot of people would be really pissed off, and I don't think that there would ever be any kind of like, you know, civil revolt. I think Zelensky would lose a lot of trust because he's always you know, talked about he doesn't want to concede anything. He's always said that, and like he wants Ukraine back. And I think if he conceded on that, then I don't think he'd be president for much longer. But you know, it's not to say that it shouldn't happen. You know, if that's going to save lives and that's what the Ukrainian people are happy about, cool. But I just don't. I mean, I would be pretty pissed off as well. You know, I'd also be pretty annoyed. But also, you've got to look into the future, and think, you know, if we take those concessions, is that going to save millions of lives? Yeah, it probably is. So, you know, it's pros and cons.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think, you know, you're not allowed to talk about this, and, you know, I won't put you in the hot seat, but there is this idea that I've spoken with a lot of guys about, yeah, okay, but what is the losses? If Ukraine does, yep, we're going to push for Crimea and we need to go through those 7 layers of the biggest defensive works we've seen in the past 80 years, and all this and all that, okay, how many guys are we going to lose? Because warfare doesn't just, you don't just walk across. You could have 200,000 guys straight from fucking, you know, from the SAS and SB, and you're still going to have huge losses in a warfare like that. What, you know, is it Pyrrhic? Is any victory going to be a Pyrrhic victory, of which the cost is not worth the win? And I actually think this is both ways. I think for Russia too, the cost Russia would have trying to take cities now, even if they did, the losses are going to be so fucking extreme that the long term is just going to not be there. And that's my fear for this war, is that any goal set, whether it's Russia's or Ukraine's, would the losses incurred trying to achieve that be Pyrrhic? But I guess that's a question for generals.
I mean, like Crimea is going to be, I think it will happen one day, and you know, that is going to have to be a very, very well orchestrated attack. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like, you know, knowing that the way that the Ukrainians work and the equipment they have available to them, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw something that was kind of like the opposite of Dunkirk, where it's just a fuckload of soldiers on a load of small boats rolling up onto a beach somewhere. Like, I wouldn't be surprised about that. I really wouldn't. Really? But
you just have, yeah, but the thing is, you just have one Dushka on the thing. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll see
have
exactly
to have more guys than bullets that they had. There's no cover on the water. Yeah.
And that's exactly what, you know, we look at D-Day, you know, and I'm just talking about that from like, okay, if it was going to happen tomorrow, we know what equipment mainly that, you know, Ukrainians don't have large battleships and landing craft. They've got, they go around Odessa and collect up all the boats they can find. And I wouldn't be surprised at that, but I also think that would be an incredibly stupid thing to do. But also then you look at, I mean, I don't think Crimea is ever going to happen until they fight over the left bank of Kherson and then down south and sort of clear out that area towards, round to like Mariupol and all that sort of stuff. And then after that, there's a potential there because you've got 3 potential entry points into Crimea. But yeah, I don't think I mean, the loss is there. I think if we fought through that is like Crimea on its own is at least another couple of years of fighting just on its own, and that is going to be probably the hardest, most difficult fighting there is. I'd be surprised if in that 2 years you didn't see a significant amount more casualties than you've seen in this war up until now, just in Crimea.
Yeah. Well, I spoke about that today in my video today. Today's what day is it? The fucking 13th in Australia. Was the worst is yet to come. And I said, no matter which country it goes for its goals here, whether it's Russia or Ukraine or whichever side of the bias, if you're a viewer watching, the worst battles are yet to come by a mile. The biggest battles I've seen is Mariupol, Avdiivka, Bakhmut, and some other ones thrown in there. I know I'm paying off a lot. But if Russia want to push for Kharkiv, Kyiv, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, even Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Kharkiv, they're significantly different battles to what we've seen, and vice versa. If Ukraine want to push Donetsk, Sevastopol, holy shit! And I'm like, think of what we've seen. You can go on Reddit or Twitter and see how brutal this war is. Boys, we haven't seen shit yet compared to what it would take for either way to achieve that goal, and that concerns me. It's just a guy, because I always put that on for the boys, first and foremost, because I can fully understand, how people end up in the service. Fuck, man, when I was in Ukraine as an early journalist, I considered signing up, but I was like, I'm too fat and retarded. Man,
the amount of fat retards we have out here now it would just surprise you.
Maybe. But yeah, and I get it, not to go down the rabbit hole, but I can sympathize with other units all around the world, especially in Middle East, of like how you end up being in there as a young man. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, man. Yeah, it's wild, huh? Wild.
Best time of my life, honestly. Best time of my life.
I'm glad for you, man.
It's ups and downs, but yeah, wouldn't change it for a second, that's for sure. And it also makes me when I went back to the British Army, I think it was just kind of hilarious, because obviously now the British Army has only got like the senior soldiers are the guys that went to like Afghan, and all the junior soldiers have never done anything, and so you kind of felt like a bit like in the club with like all the older boys like going back, and
walking in with a 10-inch dick, mate. That's just literally though, man. It's I've said this multiple times. I'm like, the conventional warfare combat experience that a single Ukrainian platoon has is more than the entirety of NATO in conventional warfare. Like, you and I, from our time in the military around similar times. Okay, we had combat vets in our units, but they were combat vets of fighting dudes, and not trying to take anything away from them, but they were fighting dudes in sandals and an AK, and a rusty AK at that, and some fucking radios. They're not fighting a side that's conventional with modern tanks, modern fighter aircraft, satellites, all this shit. Think of last time we fought an enemy like that. Well, depending where you want to point to, but as far as, that it's matching shit, well, we've got to look back a fair way. That I think, guys, we have this sort of Western savior syndrome of, we're going to train the Ukrainians and get them, like, train them what? Okay, you might train them to clear a room and go jump in a trench and some drills. Because I know that the NATO standard drills may be better. But as far as, we need to be learning the other way back. There's more experience in their fucking pinky toe. Same with and this is the thing I'll say, same with the Russians too. The Russian platoon on the other side, has more experience than the conventional warfare experience than the entire Chinese fucking military as well.
Yeah.
And militarily, if your commanders there and generals and soldiers, you need to be looking inwards, going, we need to take note of that, and take that on board. The West needs to do it, man, because the West is getting exposed with huge issues. We're out of fucking shells. Like, how can we, in a war that is fairly localized, like it's Ukraine and Russia, it's not a world war, the West can't produce enough shells? That's fucking embarrassing, man. Like that is just fucking insanity.
I don't know how we've got to that point of like, surely someone in these Western countries realized, like, building up to this, like, hey, we're giving all our stuff away to Ukraine right now. We're probably going to run out soon. We should probably start producing more. And everyone was like, nah, that'd be fine. It's all good. Don't worry about it. You're like, okay, man, no problem. Yeah, it was no, it's absolutely, I completely agree. And we're at a point now where, for instance, the EOD guys that are training the Ukrainians, I don't know if you ever got taught the tripwire feeler with a bit of 14 gauge wire wrapped around your finger, and you sort of just up and down, up and down. Now they're trying to teach the Ukrainians, like, yeah, this is how you search for a tripwire. And they're like, yeah, but when we're looking for tripwires, we're going along wood lines that are like, 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers long, and you're doing that and you're walking like a pace every 5 seconds. We'd just get demolished by artillery. And they're like, yeah, but this is how we got taught we've been told to teach you like this. So they're like, well, that's fucking stupid. We're never going to do that. We'll just get killed by artillery. And they're like, yeah, but it works in Afghanistan when we're going through compounds. So, like, it's all good. And it's like, and no one wants, like, exactly how you say, like, it really should be like some senior soldiers should be coming back to the British, teaching them what works, and then the British taking on the role of training the new guys, like the conscripts and new guys that are coming through training. That's how it should work, because then it frees up, Ukrainians that can train, that were training, they can go fight. But it also means that you can train them to a higher standard in other elements of like marksmanship, accuracy, and weapons handling and stuff like that. So yeah, it's an interesting one for sure.
Oh, bro, I think that's a great example. I think the best example that I quote all the time is with the Leopard tanks in Germany, right? And the Ukrainian tank crews, like, right, so what happens if we come to a minefield? I try and go around it. Okay. What if we can't go around it? No, don't drive through it. Go around it. And they're like, okay. The first time we see a Leopard tank, they've just driven straight into a minefield, and it's not the fault of the Ukrainian guys in the tank. It's the fault of the trainers, because they didn't understand that. No. Okay, in Afghan, this might be a minefield in this area. The whole South is a minefield. The entire South at the point, I think it was Budanov who said that there are 3 mines per square meter in the South. And it's like, you can't teach these guys drive around it. There's no, what, you're going to fucking go into Russia somewhere, come down fucking Rostov. And that's how you avoid the minefield. It's fucking impossible. We need to be, there is this Western savior complex, and that ties into what we spoke about in the beginning of those sort of fucking, what I call them, fictional characters rocking around Kyiv in their bum bags, multicams, who are just over from the States. And you're like, you have this opinion that you sit above these guys. And like, you're a fool, mate. You're a fool.
We actually had this conversation really recently about Westerners that treat Ukrainians like they're like second-class citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely guarantee you, every time you see it happen, it will always be someone over here that has not done anything for the war.
Yep.
Like, no matter what they fucking say, if I see like someone like gobbing off to a taxi driver, gobbing off to the police, fucking being a dick to the receptionist at a building, or a waitress in a restaurant, I just think, like, well, you've obviously done nothing here. You'll never meet someone who's actually made a difference here that has that opinion. And I think and I don't really know why. I think it's just really easy to tell. I think it's really easy to tell. But
put it in like terms of military, is the guys who I've met who are like the least gob offy, like, just normal dudes are all like the SAS guys. Anyone who's like you're I don't like a American term would be a boot or a lead in Australia, like a junior soldier. Like, oh, you're a fucking boot, you're a this, you're a that, is done by fucking flogs who are just whatever. But never ever will some dude from SB 22 whatever be like, oh, they'll be like, oh, hey boys, what's going on? Like hanging out, like, wait, like you guys doing that? That's fucking cool. Let's do whatever. And it's always these dudes who haven't done shit that are, and I always say this, if you like online, the more someone mentions what they did in the military, probably the less that they did. Like,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
There was a big thing out here actually where one of the sniper teams had a guy came in, he was a TL, and then there was some real like, you know, some bizarring stuff happened where he took his Ukrainian girlfriend who was not military, and I took her out on like a bit of war tourism into central Bakhmut, like literally the most dangerous war zone on the earth at that point in that time. And then an artillery shell landed and she caught a bit of shrap to her shoulder. And he put it up over the we need Kazivac for my girlfriend. And the talk is like, the fuck did you just say? Like, so anyway, they start looking into him, and he basically come over here and claimed to be ex-Canadian Special Forces sniper. And then they all looked into it and they realized that that guy had already been caught out for this because he'd been sent to court in the US in Canada, and he'd claimed to be part of that unit in Canada at this court hearing, and the arresting officer that was in the court was actually from that unit. So he rang the CO and was like, did this guy ever serve? And they're like, absolutely not, no. And it turns out he was like, he spent 4 years as a logistics driver in the Canadian Army, but nobody had done a background check. So he'd just been rocking around like, yeah, XSF sniper. And actually, he just almost got guys killed. But the funny part about that is that they then replaced him with another guy who was on the team, who then said like, yeah, I was a British Army sniper, blah, blah. And he got command of the team. And then we went out on a few ops, and everyone was like, this guy's fucking insane. Like, he was trying to get us to do like a 72-hour OP, like with zero like sleeping bag, roll mat, nothing, just led on the ground with your rifle and your belt kit and your body armor. But it was fucking January, right? It was like straight up, or February. It was like straight up like -20. And he was like, yeah, 72 hours. Just if you, and I was like, you'll die. You'll get hypothermia and die. Like that's not how like hard you think you are. Like that's just physics, biology. You will fucking die. And he was like, well, if you want to be a fucking pussy, you don't come on my op then. Like fuck off. I was like, all right, bro. Like I'm not coming on your op. Like that's retarded. And anyway, it turns out again, he also was like lying about his thing, and it was just hilarious that like GUR or like the Legion were like, oh, we've got this guy, he lied, so we're going to replace him with this guy. But they didn't for 1 second think maybe we should fucking check this guy, right? We should check out if he's fucking real. So yeah, that's my little dit on fucking Walter Mitty's out here, you know.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, I knew a dude who was all on about, oh, I was a Navy SEAL this, Navy SEAL that. And I saw him rock up, and I was just staring at this dude, and I'm like, dude, your body armor sits just the way it sits on your body. You haven't done much. It's like when you're in the infantry and you look over at the truckies and you're like, why does your body armor just look shit? Like, why does it not sit on you well? It's like you haven't worn this for 16 hours a day because it would be too uncomfortable. Like, yeah. Not bashing anyone, but you can just tell. And this dude rocks up and he's got like shit on it. I'm like, there's no fucking way this dude was a SEAL. And I asked him, and he was sort of like, hush, I did some of this, some of that. I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. Yeah, it's just like the dude's handing out the CIA coins. I'm like, yeah, because Spook's going around handing out coins. Like, I reckon I've got one, man. I reckon I've got one somewhere, because I was like, yeah, I'll fucking get one.
Yeah. I'm like, and I'll just lie about where I got it from. I'll just lie about it.
Straight AliExpress, bro. No, I wanted it for the story of like some fucking flog gave me this and you're some spook, or it's some wild psyop operation where it's like, nah, they'll expect that I'm this, but I'm actually like real.
Yeah. That is psyop. I don't know what I think now.
Yeah, it's the FSB posing as a CIA Walter Mitty within key. Perfect cover.
That would be clever as fuck, actually, because no one would even give him 2 looks. Everyone would be like, yeah, all right, man, cool.
I'd actually be, dead serious, man. I do a lot of reading about archives that have come out from defected spies. Particularly, well, most of the archives are Soviet because there's a lot more defectors into the West than the other way for obvious reasons. And fuck, man, I reckon Ukraine need to be careful of some of these like Walter Mitty types because obviously they're gullible. Like people could bullshit to them like, oh yeah, this and that, and probably want some funds. And what information could some of these just dickheads who have no idea what's going on, who are saying that they're this, actually maybe fucking come across and be used by other people? Like that shit happens, man. Like they look for these types specifically. Like, oh yeah, this guy's fundraising on fucking buy me a coffee and he's some fucking guy who thinks he's in the CIA. Well, let's try and recruit him to do some fucking special ops shit. And next thing, he doesn't even know what he's in. And I just send us the location of when you see this. Okay, no, it's fucking this corner and this. Like, it's legit, man.
Oh, it's horrendous, and it still happens. It's why I keep saying, I'm in a sniper unit, but I'm not a sniper because I fucking despise the amount of people that are out here, and they're like, yeah, I'm a sniper. You're like, oh, what did you do in the brick mill? And they're like, I was in the signals. And you're like, fuck you, man. Like, God damn it.
It's like you'll never meet a Vietnam veteran who wasn't in the SAS or a sniper.
Yeah.
That's
first. Yeah. Do you know the first on the balcony like expression?
No.
It made it. The Iranian embassy siege in like 94. And like you'll always meet people that are like, yeah, man, second on the balcony. And you're like, fucking yeah. I've met 12 people that were second on the balcony. Like, cool.
Fuck. Well, mate, fuck. Is there anything we haven't gone over that you'd like to speak about that's burning on you?
No, I guess we've covered it all, and I guess my main thing was I think when I came back and I first messaged you, I wanted to tell the world about how the British Army came after me for fighting in Ukraine over a little miscommunication on dates. But I also guess that as time passed, I was like, fuck them, let them be. But also, it is kind of nice to get it out there because if anyone wants to email the British Army, tell them they're dicks. Feel free. But no, I think we've covered like the stuff that I wanted to get out there and try and put out there to the world. So thanks for having me.
No, anytime, mate. Well, you've got me on Signal, and that's always open. I'm normally a better replier than I fucking have been. And it's always open for you to come and discuss shit as well, whether it's long form, short form, whatever. But I will say in the British military, how the mighty has fallen from the world coming after fucking you because I know your AWOL paperwork wasn't in. The British military has fallen off harder than Megan Fox after Transformers. It's a real.
Oh, mate, you're telling me, right? Fucking like rule Britannia, like the sun never sets, and now look at us. Oh, bunch of crying babies about everything. Yeah, no, really upsetting. But I try not to think about it too much. I'm Ukrainian now, as far as I'm concerned. That's my plan for the rest of life.
Yeah. Ukraine will be in the EU before fucking the UK comes back.
Oh god, yeah. I'm just so desperate. That's the whole reason I'm here. I'm just so desperate to get that EU passport back. I'm fed up of the passport queues. I just decided I'll come here, fight, get citizenship, and call it a day.
Well, mate, look, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, man. And fucking anytime, any of you and your boys, just fucking let us know. I'm always around.
Absolutely. All right, man. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Easy. You too, man. I'll speak to you soon.